Okay, so if I asked you to just strip away everything, I mean, everything complex about life, forget DNA, forget proteins, all of it, and just name the single most critical fuel for, well, for the entire biological world, what would it be?
That's a great question.
You might think sunlight or water, maybe,
Yeah.
but the actual, the chemical that keeps the lights on.
It would have to be C6H12O6. It's the answer to almost every energy question in nature. Just a simple arrangement of 6 carbon, 12 hydrogen, and 6 oxygen atoms.
We are talking, of course, about glucose, but here's the thing, and this is what I was really wrestling with prepping for this deep dive. When we hear glucose or sugar or carbs, we instantly load that word with baggage.
Oh, absolutely.
We think diet culture, guilty pleasures, diabetes, that 3 p.m. candy bar crash. We've sort of villainized this molecule.
To the point where we forget what it actually is.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, a really dangerous oversight. Because you just can't understand biology or nature or even the human brain without getting a handle on this one molecule.
It's the universal engine.
It really is. It powers a blade of grass, the bacteria in your gut, and, the very thought you're having right now about what I'm saying.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to push aside all the diet fad noise and just look at the raw machinery. We've got a huge stack of research here, everything from 19th century chemistry to modern food production.
And maybe the most important piece, a paper from just this past year, 2025, that, well, it frankly changes the entire game.
It scares me a little bit.
It should. It really does. It shifts the whole paradigm from glucose as fuel to glucose as information.
Correct.
And that one change, it changes everything.
We will definitely get to that big review later on, but we have to start with the basics, the identity crisis. Because I was looking at food labels in my kitchen and I see glucose, I see dextrose, I see blood sugar.
Right.
Are these the same thing? Are they related? What are we even looking at?
This is probably the most common point of confusion. And it's mostly because of how different industries talk about it.
Yeah.
But here's the bottom line. Chemically, physically, molecularly, glucose and dextrose are the exact same thing.
The exact same. Not like a cousin molecule.
Identical, 100%.
Yeah.
Put them under a microscope, run them through a mass spectrometer. They are indistinguishable.
So why the two names? Is it just a marketing gimmick? Does dextrose sound, I don't know, more clinical, less sugary?
There's definitely a marketing element to it today, for sure. You see dextrose on a label, and it feels a little less threatening than sugar.
Right.
But the origin isn't marketing. It actually comes from 19th century physics. It's all about how the molecule interacts with light.
With light. Okay, you have to explain that. This is the chirality thing in the notes.
Precisely. In chemistry, a lot of molecules are chiral. It comes from the Greek word for hand, kyr.
And?
Think about your hands. They're mirror images, right? They look the same,
Yeah.
but you can't perfectly stack them on top of each other.
And you can't put your right hand in a left-handed glove.
Exactly. It doesn't fit. Molecules can have that same handedness. And back in the day, before we had all this advanced tech, one way they identified molecules was by shining polarized light through a solution of them.
Okay.
And when they did this with the glucose you find in nature, from grapes or whatever, the beam of light actually rotated.
It twisted the light.
It twisted it to the right.
To the right.
And the Latin word for right is dexter.
Ah, so dextrose.
Dextrose, the right-handed sugar.
Wow. That's surprisingly literal. So dextrose just means right O's.
Pretty much, yeah.
Huh.
Today, in a biochemistry class, we'd call it D-glucose.
Yeah.
But in the food industry and in medicine, that old name dextrose just stuck around.
Which, of course, begs the question, is there a left glucose?
Good.
A sinister. Oh, I think sinister is Latin for left, isn't it?
It is, and there is. It's called L-glucose. And this is where things get really fascinating about life on Earth.
Okay.
You can make L-glucose in a lab. It's a white powder, dissolves in water. It even tastes sweet. But if you eat it, 0 calories.
Wait, hold on. Pause. It's sweet, looks like sugar, tastes like sugar, but has no calories. That sounds like the holy grail for, diet soda. Why isn't everything made with L-glucose?
2 reasons. One is cost. It's very expensive to synthesize. But the bigger reason is biology's lock and key system.
A hand-in-glove thing again.
Exactly. Every single enzyme in your body, all the little machines that break down food for energy, they're all designed for the right-handed glove. If you swallow L-glucose, your enzymes literally can't grab onto it. It just passes right through you.
So all of biology is just right-handed.
Almost exclusively. It's one of the great mysteries, really. Why D-glucose and not L-glucose? We don't really know. But Every plant, every animal, every cell in your body is built to run on the D form. Nature picked a side billions of years ago.
So when I see dextrose on a food label or an IV bag in a hospital, it's basically saying this is the one. This is the biologically active form your body can actually use.
That's it exactly.
Yeah.
In a hospital, the bag will say dextrose. That's the clinical term. But when your doctor discusses your blood test, they'll say your glucose level.
Yeah.
Same molecule, just a different dialect of science.
Okay, let's talk about the physical stuff. White powder. Incredibly soluble, right? The notes say something like 900 grams per liter.
It is remarkably soluble. You can almost dissolve a kilogram of it into a liter of water.
Yeah.
And that's critical because it has to be transported through your blood or through the sap in a plant. If it wasn't so soluble, it would just clog up the works.
The notes also called it a reducing sugar. That sounds very technical. Why does that matter for us?
It matters for cooking and for aging. A reducing sugar just means it's chemically reactive. It has this part of its structure that really wants to bond with amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein.
Okay.
When you sear a steak and it gets that beautiful brown crust, or when bread bakes and gets that golden color, that's the Maillard reaction. And that's your glucose reacting with proteins. In a hot pan, it's delicious. In your body, over decades, that's a different story. It can lead to tissue damage.
And the name glucose itself, not dextrose, but glucose.
That's from ancient Greek, glucose. It meant sweet wine or must, basically the juice from crushed grapes. It's a nice reminder that before factories, our main experience with it was just the sweetness of fruit.
All right, so we know what it is. The right-handed, light-twisting, super soluble sugar that powers the world. Let's dig into that power, the universal engine. How fundamental is this cycle, really?
It's the primary energy axis of the entire planet. I mean, think about it. The sun just blasts Earth with photons, pure energy. But you can't eat sunlight.
Right, I can't plug my brain into a sunbeam. We need a battery.
We need a storage medium, and that is what glucose is. Plants take in water, they take in CO2 from the air, and then they use that solar energy to literally weld those carbon atoms together. They trap the sunlight in the chemical bonds of that C612O6 molecule.
So glucose is literally a battery made of sunlight.
It is. And then we come along.
And we steal the batteries.
We're the battery thieves. We eat the plant, or we eat the animal that ate the plant. Our digestion breaks it all back down into single glucose molecules, and our cells basically do photosynthesis in reverse. They break the bonds to release that solar energy.
And that creates ATP,
Adenosine triphosphate.
the universal currency.
The universal currency. You want to blink? Pay some ATP. You want to think? Pay some ATP. And you make that ATP primarily by burning glucose.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. We hear all about the keto diet, about burning fat. The body can burn other things. It's not like we need glucose for everything, do we?
That is true for most of your body. Your muscles, for example, love burning fat. It's a great dense fuel. Your heart actually prefers fatty acids over glucose.
That.
But there is one organ that is an incredibly picky eater. And unfortunately, it's the one in charge.
The brain.
The brain is a glucose hog, an absolute hog. It's only about 2% of your body mass, but it consumes roughly 20% of your total glucose-derived energy.
20%. Why? Why can't the brain just burn fat like a muscle can?
It's a question of speed and access. Fatty acids are big, clunky molecules. They can't easily cross the blood-brain barrier.
That security wall that protects the brain.
Exactly. But glucose is small, it's water-soluble, and it has a VIP pass.
Yeah.
There are special doors called GLUT1 transporters that just wave glucose straight through into the brain.
So the brain is like a high-performance race car that only takes premium fuel.
And it needs it constantly, moment to moment. The brain has almost no storage capacity, it can't store fat, and it only has a tiny emergency stash of its own fuel. It needs a continuous supply from the blood.
Which brings us to the hangry phenomenon in the research. I always thought that was just a funny word, but it's biologically real.
Oh, it's very real. When your blood glucose starts to dip, that's hypoglycemia, your brain senses a fuel crisis, and it immediately starts shutting down non-essential services.
And things like being polite and making good decisions are considered non-essential.
From an evolutionary standpoint, absolutely. Impulse control, complex decision-making, emotional regulation, that all happens in the prefrontal cortex, which is a very energy-hungry part of the brain. When the budget gets cut, that's the first department to see layoffs.
So I just become more primitive, reactive.
You lose your executive function. There was that study on ego depletion, which suggests that willpower itself is a limited resource that runs on glucose. Every time you resist a donut, you burn a little bit of glucose, do that all day without refueling, and eventually the tank runs dry. You snap.
That is both fascinating and terrifying. that my personality is basically contingent on my last meal.
In some ways, yes.
So we have to store this stuff. Plants use starch. We use...
Glycogen. It's often called animal starch. It's the same idea, long chains of glucose, but it's structured differently. It's more branched like a bushy tree, which lets us snap off the glucose molecules much faster when we need them.
And we have two main storage tanks for it, the liver and the muscles. But the notes made a really sharp distinction. One is a bank and one is a hoarder.
This is one of the most elegant parts of our physiology. The liver is the altruist, the community bank. It stores about 100, maybe 150 grams of glycogen.
Okay.
And when your blood sugar starts to drop, like when you're sleeping, the liver senses this. It breaks down its glycogen and releases fresh glucose back into the bloodstream for everyone to use.
It shares. It keeps the brain fed.
It keeps the lights on for the whole system. A real team player.
Good guy, liver. Okay, now tell me about the muscles.
The muscles are the hoarders. They hold way more, maybe 300 to 500 grams, but they are chemically selfish. They're missing one specific enzyme.
Okay.
It's called glucose 6-phosphatase.
Of course it is. And what does that do?
It's basically the key to the exit door.
Yeah.
Without that enzyme, once glucose enters a muscle cell, it gets chemical lock put on it,
Yeah.
and it cannot leave. It is physically trapped inside that muscle cell forever.
So even if my brain is starving for fuel and I'm about to pass out, my big quad muscles are just sitting on this huge pile of sugar saying, nope, sorry, this is mine.
That's exactly what they're saying. This is for me and me alone.
Why would evolution do that? It seems like a terrible design flaw.
Think about survival. If you are running from a predator, you need your leg muscles to have an immediate guaranteed fuel supply. You can't have them sharing their energy with the rest of the body because you might run out of gas mid-sprint. It ensures the fight-or-flight system is always fully loaded.
A survival prioritization. The brain gets the liver stash, the muscles keep their own.
Precisely.
All right, let's pivot from nature to the factory. Because, let's be honest, most of the glucose we eat isn't coming from a piece of fruit. The scale of this industry is just huge.
It's a marvel of industrial chemistry. And in the United States, it is almost entirely a story about corn.
It's always corn.
It's always corn. In Europe, you might see wheat or potato starch, but the basic process is the same. You take starch, those long glucose chains, and you find a way to chop them up into individual glucose molecules.
How do you do that? You can't just boil it, right?
No, you need enzymes. The process is called enzymatic hydrolysis. It basically mimics what your own digestive system does, just in a giant vat.
Okay, walk me through it.
Step 1 is liquefaction. You make a slurry of cornstarch and water, and you add an enzyme called alpha amylase, which usually comes from a bacteria. This enzyme's like a big machete. It just hacks the long starch chains into shorter, more manageable pieces.
So you go from a giant ball of yarn to a bunch of shorter strings.
Exactly. But it's not glucose yet. For that, you need step 2, saccharification. You add a second, more precise enzyme called glucoamylase. This one is like a tiny pair of scissors that snips the individual glucose molecules off the ends of those strings.
And that's what gives you corn syrup.
That gives you glucose syrup, yes. It's about 95% pure glucose.
But this is where I get confused again. I see corn syrup on a label, and I see high fructose corn syrup. They are not the same thing.
Not at all. A huge difference. The glucose syrup we just made isn't actually that sweet. Remember, pure glucose is only about 70 or 80% as sweet as table sugar.
So if you put it in a soda, it would taste kind of bland.
It would taste weak, yeah.
Oh.
So they have to hack it. They add a third enzyme, glucose isomerase. And what this enzyme does is it grabs the glucose molecule and physically rearranges its atoms. It turns the 6-sided ring of glucose into a 5-sided ring.
It turns it into fructose.
It turns about half of it into fructose, which is much, much sweeter. And that blend of about 55% fructose and 35% glucose is what we call high fructose corn syrup. It perfectly mimics the sweetness of table sugar.
So HFCS is an engineered product for sweetness. Pure glucose is used for other things.
Exactly. Pure glucose is used more for its physical properties. It's a humectant.
Humectant, great word. What does it do?
It holds on to water. The reason a soft-baked cookie from the store stays soft for weeks is often because of glucose syrup. It literally pulls moisture from the air and traps it in the cookie.
And it's used in ice cream too, right? To stop it from getting icy.
Yes. It lowers the freezing point and prevents large ice crystals from forming. It's what gives you that smooth, creamy mouthfeel. It really is the Swiss Army knife of food science.
And it's also on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines.
Absolutely critical. In a trauma ward, for someone who can't eat, an IV bag of dextrose is life support. It's the most direct way to get energy into the human body.
Okay. So we've set the stage. Glucose is fuel. It's the foundation of everything. It's an industrial product. But now we have to get to this 2025 Stanford study.
The game changer.
This is the part of the notes that I just had to read it 3 times. Because for 100 years, the central dogma has been glucose is something we burn. It's a log for the fire.
Fuel or structure. Burn it for energy or use it as a building block. That was the choice. Catabolic or anabolic.
But this new research says there's a third option we completely missed.
A massive option. The study suggests that glucose is also a signal, a master regulator that literally tells a cell what to become.
The process of differentiation.
Exactly. That process where a blank slate stem cell decides to become a skin cell or a bone cell or a fat cell. We always thought glucose just provided the energy for that to happen.
Right, like the construction workers need lunch. Glucose is the lunch. But the blueprints for the building come from somewhere else.
That's the perfect analogy. This study showed that glucose is also reading the blueprints. It's pulling the levers.
How? What's the actual mechanism?
They found that an intact glucose molecule binds directly to a very specific protein called IRF6.
IRF6. What's that?
It's a famous transcription factor. It's a protein that controls which genes get turned on and off. We know it's deeply involved in how tissues mature, how skin forms.
So glucose is talking directly to this master protein.
It is. And here is the crucial part, the smoking gun. It does this without being metabolized.
Okay, unpack that. Why is that so important?
Normally, when we think of glucose having an effect, it's because it's being burned to make ATP energy. So to test this, the researchers use fake glucose.
Like glucose.
Glucose analogs. Molecules that look just like glucose, so they can bind to the protein. But they're built so the cell can't actually break them down for energy. They're duds.
And what happened?
The signaling still happened. The IRF6 protein still changed shape. The stem cells still got the message to differentiate. And that is definitive proof. It wasn't the energy from the sugar. It was the physical presence of the sugar molecule itself. It was acting like a piece of information.
That's just wild. It's like finding out that the gasoline in your car isn't just making the engine run, it's also whispering directions to the steering wheel.
That's a great way to put it. And it completely reframes how we have to think about diseases like cancer.
The Warburg effect, right?
Right. Decades ago, Otto Warburg noticed that cancer cells are sugar addicts. They consume enormous amounts of glucose. And the assumption has always been...
They're just hungry, they're growing fast, they need a lot of energy.
Exactly. But this new finding raises a much darker possibility. Cancer is a disease of immature cells that refuse to stop dividing and growing. What if all that excess glucose they're consuming isn't just fuel? What if it's a signal that's keeping them in that immature state?
So the high sugar levels are jamming the signal that would normally tell them to grow up and stop dividing.
That's a very real possibility. The sugar might be actively programming the tumor to stay a tumor, not just feeding it.
It also has huge implications for diabetes. Diabetics have terrible wound healing.
And we always thought that was about poor circulation or bacteria. But what if the high blood sugar is sending the wrong set of blueprints to the new skin cells that are trying to form? What if it's telling them to build the wall incorrectly or not at all?
It just opens up this entirely new way of thinking. It's not just a nutrient anymore. It's acting like a hormone.
It blurs that line completely. It means our body is constantly tasting the glucose level, not just to manage energy with insulin, but to make decisions about the long-term structure of our tissues.
Which brings me to the final thought I want to leave the listener with, because it's a little unsettling.
The glycosine, as you called it.
Yeah. For almost all of human history, getting pure refined glucose was incredibly difficult. You had to find ripe fruit, you had to fight bees for honey.
It was a rare signal, a signal of abundance. It meant times are good, it's safe to grow.
Today, I can go to any corner store and buy a massive bottle of pure liquid glucose for a couple of dollars. We are constantly flooding our bodies with this signal.
We are swimming in it, 2047.
So my question is this. If glucose is a voice that tells our stem cells and our genes what to do, are we now just shouting at our own DNA?
I think we're screaming at it.
And what happens when you scream at a system that evolved over millions of years to listen for a whisper?
You get noise. You get distortion. And in biology, distortion and noise almost always manifest as disease. We might be fundamentally altering our tissues in ways we haven't even begun to understand, all because the signal is just too loud.
It really redefines you are what you eat. It's not just that you're made of the stuff.
The stuff is telling you what to be.
It's not just calories on a nutrition label, it's code.
It is the code of life.
Something to think about. That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.